one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Yes, Lana. Yeah, there's several seats up here. Just come on up. That's okay. Nobody's going to bite, and you're not going to be asked to speak.
There's 4 up here and 3 up, 4 up here and 4 up here, and 1 over here.
Okay, good.
And
Thank
there's a
you.
seat here.
Thank you very, very much for being here. And we'll keep this on schedule. I promised 45 minutes, and I'm charged of the meeting. We usually hit it, but we'll see. I'd like to welcome you. This is a combination of 3 different communities. This being the community of the firefighters who will make a presentation here. This is the community of Windcrest and those that Dan has affected by his work outside of the firefighters, first responders, and EMTs. And then, of course, it's the community that is served by Dan and his fine group of firefighters, EMTs, and first responders that are here today. We're going to be recognizing an element of each of that community to bring them together to honor Dan. I know that there can be a lot of emotion in this, and a lot of things that go on, and a lot of things are said, but today we want to focus on positive energy to honor Dan. For those who do know, I think everyone in the room would know that he submitted his resignation effective November 1st, and we'll talk about some ways at the end for us to show our concern over that decision and what may or may not be able to be done. But first we want to talk about some of the ways to honor Dan today and keep this positive. I would like to take a moment of silence as we collect our thoughts today and reflect on why we're here and what we need to accomplish. So with everyone's attention, just a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Why are you here? Why are you here? I had that question asked, why am I here? What are we doing? I'll tell you why I'm here. At my house, we have a Christmas dinner. Sometimes we have up to 50 people or more involved each and every Christmas. It's a tradition we started 15, 20 years ago, actually over 20 years ago now. And Dan and Francie and his sons have graced us with their presence on several times. And it was several Christmases ago. I won't forget it. It just happened like it happened yesterday. This is a cornucopia of food. Over a dozen families representing 50 people bring their best dishes. And they line them up there in our room, and we pull out the furniture in our living room and set up tables for a sit-down dinner on china for 50 people. And it's amazing. And everybody's there, and the food is all piled up, and we hit the button, and everybody's used to bringing their stuff, and it looks good, and it tastes good, and it's great. And I think the spouses and close relatives of firefighters know exactly what I'm going to say. The plate of food sat down. Dan sat down next to me. The responder went off. He was gone. 20 minutes later, he was back. Now, those of you that have eaten a great, delicious dinner and some of the best meals ever prepared know that 20 minutes later, the food doesn't exactly look like it did 20 minutes earlier. And everybody's trying to heat it up and trying to keep people away from getting seconds to honor Dan, but he had to leave on Christmas Day and take care of this, whatever the situation was. He sits down again to a reheated plate of food. Bam, you know. Call again. Now, I want to say something. When you get to Christmas Day, some of you in this room have relatives or friends or yourselves that have been slighted if the smallest thing goes wrong. Maybe it's a comment by your sister-in-law. Maybe it's a kid not being as appreciative for a present. Maybe it's some other situation. That can ruin a whole Christmas. This is 2 calls right at the Christmas meal. He comes back 45 minutes later to a plate of food that didn't resemble. Everybody had seconds. We couldn't keep everybody away. Everybody had thirds, fourths, and fifths, and sixths, and sevenths, I think. And desserts were already starting, which is an amazing, amazing treat. And he sat down to this plate of food, and somebody said to him, "Where were you?" And he said, "Well, we just had to wait till the coroner arrived. We had to identify, tag, and bag the body." That would be a Christmas that most of us would tell our grandchildren about for the rest of our lives, perhaps. But it was just another day for Dan. By the way, if you want to know what call that was 2 calls out of this number right here. This number is the number of calls that Dan has been on as an emergency responder. 7,865. It's decorating the room and the walls here. That was 2 of them. 2 of them. This is the kind of man that we're here to honor today and to talk about. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. As I mentioned, there's 3 different communities that are served by Dan and his work, and each one of them will be represented, and then we'll have a representative from the firefighters tell you what they're doing to honor him and how we can join in that process. I'd like to introduce Dr. Lonnie Phillips, who's a friend of Dan's, who is going to talk to us briefly about the sacrifices. Some of you know them. It was outlined in his resignation letter, but some of the sacrifices that Dan has made. Thank you. Lonnie.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good afternoon, I should say. My afternoon nap only took 15 minutes, and that wasn't quite long enough. So I am blessed to serve the Windcrest United Methodist Church as its senior pastor. And some of you may know that Dan Reese is the lay leader. He's like the head elder of that congregation. And so I've been blessed for a couple of years now to have breakfast every Tuesday morning with Dan Reese. And there have been some Tuesday mornings when Brother Dan hadn't gotten enough sleep because he's been out on one of these calls. So he's made some sacrifices of sleep. Some of us count sleep pretty important. But Dan would have breakfast. By the way, he likes, I hope I'm not talking out of school here, he likes pancakes, 3 pancakes, with sausage, lots of butter, and no syrup. All right. You can't use that. What's said here stays here, all right? Dan certainly has made some sacrifices, so has his wife Francie. They've both missed out on some sleep over the years. And Dan's 10 years of serving as both a volunteer firefighter and as a paid fire chief of Windcrest. He took that position in January 2008, was hired over 20 applicants. And at that point in time, he could, by virtue of some state limitations and regulations, he could only receive minimum wage for about 2,080 hours worth of work each year. In April of this year, 2013, those limitations were lifted, and Dan could fully be paid more than minimum wage for his efforts. You recall a couple of years ago, Dan had this sort of part-time job as an instructor, as a navigation instructor at Randolph. That position left Randolph and was moved to Pensacola, Florida. And Dan and Francie at that point in time made a choice to stay here. And so it was. He gave up a $80,000 a year position to stay as the fire chief of Windcrest, based on a handshake within the city administration that when the time came due, which was April of this year, he'd be duly compensated on a level perhaps with what the police chief gets paid. So by rough estimation, if you're a numbers person, the city of Windcrest has saved about $260,000 by paying him minimum wage. And Dan himself and Francie gave up over $200,000 by his staying here. Sacrifice. A lot of you know what sacrifice is. You sacrifice for your children. You sacrifice for your community. You sacrifice for your country. I've never known a man with such great integrity as Dan Reese. The city of Windcrest is losing a man of great integrity.
Do this. Wow, this is bad. All right, thank you. We got to work on it. Kill the mic over here. All right. All right. Should work. All right, here we go. Good. All right. At this point, another gentleman that I'd like to speak is Glenn Gillis, who's a Windcrest resident, and he will tell us a little about the situation and how Dan's calls affected his life in a very, very positive way and the meaning of that. And Glenn, would you please come forward? Thank you.
Am I on now?
Yes.
Okay. About 8 years ago now, I lost my father. But in that period of time before we lost him, 3 of those calls were made by me, and Dan was one of the responders, and I'm sure the prime responder, but it was a very difficult time. We did not know what was going on with my father, his behavior. It was supposedly dementia or what have you, but there were those times when that crucial amount of help came from Dan Reese. He knew what was going on, and he could see the distress in myself and in my mother, but he responded with patience and caring, and what other word could I use but love in those situations. He had known my father from Windcrest United Methodist Church, and all I can say is I don't know how I could ever repay Dan for what he did for myself and my mother, but most of all for my father. I knew that my father didn't have much time left on this earth, but all of the help that Dan provided on those calls will live with me forever, despite, it was just short period of time, but it's going to carry with me for the rest of my life. And I know that the city of Windcrest is losing somebody whose value is priceless. His experience and his care that he was able to provide. And like I said, I don't know how I could ever repay Dan, but he's a dear friend, he's a brother in Christ, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Before, much of the community is served, and we want to make sure that everybody was represented. I have a letter here. There was an email sent. Maybe many of you don't know that Dan and Francie have been active in youth in the community for years and years and years. They have affected many youth that have been a part of the Windcrest community and moved on. I have a great letter here from a young man named Garrett Fair, who's a very successful graduate of Roosevelt High School and doing some great things. And his parents brought me this email, and we asked him to, if we could read it. He said he would be proud and happy for us to read it. And for those of you who don't know, again, Dan and Francie have been intimately locked with working with youth through the Windcrest United Methodist Church and other venues. And I know that many young firefighters are looking to him as a mentor, and the work that he's done. And his patience and hard work are pay off in the community with like-minded youth that depart from us and then go on to do great things. This is one. Garrett Fair. I learned recently of the current situation involving Dan Reese and his treatment by the city of Windcrest following his years of service, commitment, and hard work for the community. While I no longer reside in Windcrest, I grew up there and graduated from Roosevelt High School in 2007. I was just distraught to learn of this current situation because I care very deeply about my hometown, and I have a tremendous amount of admiration and respect for Mr. Dan Reese. I first came to know Dan as my confirmation mentor at Windcrest United Methodist Church from 2002 to 2003, the same year he began volunteering at the fire department. He served as an important role model for me as a young man and was instrumental to my development as a Christian. I count him among one of the many members of the Windcrest community that have helped shape me into the person I am today, and I'm very grateful for his guidance and leadership in my life. More importantly, though, I'm grateful for the 10 years of service that he has given to the community. People like Dan Rees are what make communities like Windcrest special, and I'm disappointed to learn of how he's been treated after his years of hard work. I hope that he reconsiders his resignation and that he is properly compensated for his efforts. If not, I will feel that much less secure that he will no longer be watching over the community I grew up in, that many of my family members and friends still call home. Garrett Fair. Thank you. I'd like to invite Alex, would you come forward? So we get your mic up. Where are we? Oh, here we go. Alex. Here we go. Thank you. This is a representative of the firefighters who's going to talk a little bit about Dan and tell us what they're doing in preparation for honoring Dan. This is one of the reasons that we came here today, and I'd like to have you go to the floor. Thank you. I'll get you turned on here. Okay, you should be on.
Hello. How you doing, guys? Good evening. My name is Alex Lopez. I'm a lieutenant with the Windcrest Volunteer Fire Department. A little bit of a brief history about me and Dan Rees. We actually joined, well, he got promoted at the same time I was joining the department. So I actually got the honor of meeting our old chief, Chief Wynn, talking to him a little bit, and him leading me to meet Dan Rees and talking to him about joining the department. I was fresh out the academy. He welcomed me with open arms, and it was kind of a learning process for both of us, at the same time, joining the department and running calls and things like that. What a lot of people don't know is prior to him getting promoted to fire chief in 2008, he actually was a normal volunteer. He showed up at the fire department, he helped out, he ran calls with the normal guys that usually run the calls every day on a daily basis. So he had a real good understanding of how to talk to us in our time of need, from you being the lowest guy of running the calls to being an officer for the fire department. But what a lot of people don't know is, like they were saying, the number is 7,863 calls that he ran. Dan Rees led by example. He actually, since 2008, has been the lead responder for our fire department, and that's rare. Your paid departments that you have around the surrounding city of Windcrest, their paid chiefs don't run calls. Those guys, do the logistical side and deal with the city aspect of being a fire chief. So Dan Rees led by example, and that really helped us as leaders, as firefighters and firemen of the department to better ourselves on a daily basis. And like they were saying, during the middle of the night or during the day, on the weekends, things like that, if we're a volunteer department, so if we didn't have guys that were signed up and running calls, he had to take responsibility for those calls. It was his job to run those calls. So understand that we're not a paid department, so you have guys that have to work, have to go to school, things like that, but he took upon that responsibility to run calls and answer the call when no one else would, because he wanted to make sure that there was somebody to respond to a call to the citizens of Windcrest. And that was the man that Dan Rees was. One of his favorite sayings was, "Let your yeses be your yeses and your nos be your nos." So as young men, we kind of grew through the hard knocks of things, and we kind of had to really understand what that meaning was a little bit harder than a lot of people would have to. But Dan Rees, like I said, honoring him today was a great guy, and he led by example. And in my situation, consider him as a second father, just because of the aspect of him helping me grow in the fire department and finding a full-time job, and not as a firefighter, just as a human being and growing as a person. So another thing that we were talking earlier about, another way of honoring him and his departure with the fire department, every November, second weekend of November, we have a fireman's banquet. And what that is usually, it's a banquet for the firemen. They bring a date. We hand out awards, the firefighter of the year, fireman of the year, things like that. Like I said, since 2008, he's actually been the lead responder of that, so most of the awards go to him because he's doing all the calls. But what we're doing this year is going to be a little bit different, and talking to Captain Vargas. Usually the venue that we have that event at is at Taco Spark, the rec center, and that's a real small venue. Like I said, usually just the firemen go, and they're allowed to bring one date. But talking to Captain Vargas, we're actually going to try to look for a bigger venue so we can accommodate more people, because this year it's not only going to be a fireman's banquet, but it's going to be a going away party, per se, for Dan Reese. So this year, what we're going to do is we're going to give him a gift. We are open to donations and things like that, and it's going to be more of just a farewell gift. Thank you for your services, and for helping a lot of the guys that volunteer grow as men and as people, as women as well. We have some women firefighters. So you can get in contact. We'll figure out if we can get a bigger venue. We'll let you know publicly, and we can go from there. Thank you for your time.
Through the wonder of technology, we're going to have Dan FaceTimed in here for a minute. We're handing out these signs right here. I'll explain what this project is. Can Dan hear me now? If not, he can hear me? Okay, good. And we'll keep the secret a secret. Anyway, take one of these signs and hand it down. We're going to scan the room here in just a minute. Hopefully, through the modern technology of he's on the East Coast. His father's birthday was yesterday. We wish him and Francie well for that. FaceTime isn't going through. We're going to have an audio. For those of you that know what a conference call was back in the day, that's what we'll probably have the equivalent of today. Just Dan sitting at home or sitting somewhere with his father and family, and through the wonder of technology, we'll hear his voice. And I'd like him to say a few things to us and wish us well. Do we have his voice? Do we have him there? Let's see it.
Hello. I'm on speaker now. Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm speaking to the people now, not just you.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming out to this event called I'm a Fan for Dan. I'm humbled that both of you showed up. Especially since Francie's with me, and I thought that would be the second person to show up. I know there's firefighters in the room, and I just want to note that they were up early this morning at a house fire, and they had a very long. It started at 3 o'clock in the morning, so I just want to honor them as they participated. I can tell you that I'm deeply honored to be their chief, and they make me proud, and they offer the city every day their selfless dedication. And I really wish we could be here on a different chapter in my life. When I was selected as a fire chief in 2007, I really expected to be here a very long time before I stepped down. There were some set expectations at the time. I would serve as fire chief. State imposed restrictions of minimum wage for the year point. And when those state restrictions were lifted, I would be compensated at the appropriate level as a fire chief. I honored my part of the agreement, but after 15 months of negotiations spanning 2 separate cycles, they did not honor their part of the agreement, and there has been no sensible offer. As I noted in my resignation letter, I made what I consider to be a financial decision to stay in the city that cost me over $200,000 in wages during the last year, expecting to be compensated. That has not materialized, and it's just been a significant financial hardship for my wife, and Anthony in sight. And having been told several times that something would happen, we decided it was time to move on. That became quite clear on October 6th in an email response from Mayor Baxter to ex-Mayor Don Miles when it was clear there was no progress. The city continued to pass on stalling decisions that should have been made a year ago, and so I tendered my resignation the next day on October the 7th. I was deeply saddened by the events last month, and as I stated in my resignation letter, at this point to be the fire chief, but as I needed the city to honor their commitment, they made it in 2007 before they have not. Thank you for participating with this event, and I guess I'm not sure if now it's time to take questions or how this is going to proceed, but I'm prepared to take questions.
Oh, okay, there's a surprise. Okay, hang on, I'm gonna put my standby here just a minute. Can you hear me, Dan?
I can hear you, yes, Randy.
Okay, thank you. Wow. Well, you can't see it. We don't have you Skyped in, but there are over 100 people here today. We're going to try to send you a picture. They're holding a "I'm a Dan fan" sign. Everybody hold it up for a picture. Can you get a picture there, Lisa? And we'll send it to you by some kind of way to have you see it almost live.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you. I know that you're breaking up just a little bit, and this is great that you would like to take a question or two. I have a feeling we could be here all night with you, Dan. I'm not quite sure how does the crowd feel about that? We can thank him for his time, and we have some other things that we're going to be talking about today. What do you think?
Thank you. One question.
One question.
What can we do to rectify this situation and maybe keep him on board?
There we go. Did you hear that, Dan?
I did not.
What can we do to rectify the situation and keep you on board? We have one question for you.
Well, I guess the short answer to that question is I need for the city to honor their agreement with me. Like I said, in 2007, when I was hired as a paid fire chief with the restrictions of minimum wage until 2013. I guess the answer to that would be find out from the city why they have not honored that agreement, and if they do, to be quite honest, there's a trust level that would have to be reestablished because, as I pointed out in my resignation letter, I've sort of been promised this to happen. One of the disappointments with the city right now is we're in a situation where they're pretending like this is a new issue and it's not. It's going on for 15 months, and I've been promised several times that something would happen. It did not happen, and in fact, as I put in my resignation letter, we actually had in a draft budget, and then that money went away. So I guess the short answer to your question is there's a trust level that would have to be reestablished with the city, and the city would have to, I think, compensate me as they should.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. Mission accomplished. We will now discuss how to do that. Thank you.
Randy, can I say one more thing?
Sure, please.
Okay, this hasn't been asked, but I've seen it several times, and I've even been told that that some news organizations had the idea that I was offered $61,000 to be the fire chief. That is not correct. The city has offered via a communication between lawyers $36,000 to be the fire chief. That's the only offer that has ever been on the table to be the fire. Now, what has happened is conversation with the city manager revolved if you were to take on the additional job of being the fire inspector, we might pay you more. And I can tell you where the 61 came in, and that was in a conversation on September the 12th with the city manager. The pay that we're giving the fire inspector was brought up. Now, just like in every other case, that number was brought up, never offered. The only offer in writing that I have from the city came the day after I resigned, and that was $36,000 to be the fire chief and $12,000 if I were to take on some responsibilities. Now, understand that $36,000 is $2,000 less than the beginning police. So we're way off as far as compensation, and I don't want anyone to think that the 61 was a real offer. And in fact, in the meeting on September the 12th, the manager told me that if the number was going to be above 36, that he was going to have to go through the hiring process, ask for resumes, and in order for that number to be any bigger than 30, we would have to go through a resume. He graciously offered to let me reapply that. It was going to be more than 36.